Welcome, my friends, to the Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is Christopher Gardner. Christopher is a professional body worker from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, now residing in Costa Rica. Graduating from Michigan State University in 1998, he trained in massage therapy while playing in the Arena Football League as a place kicker for the Florida Bobcats. Christopher's studies in consciousness has grounded him into a life-affirming methodology centered around nutrition. Understanding what links real nourishment to optimal health while having a symbiotic relationship with the biosphere is the main catalyst behind Christopher's work. In our discussion, Christopher will explain how diet and nutrition are instrumental in the health of our body and mind. We also discuss how the conveniences of the first world or the so-called developed countries is actually contributing toward the de-evolution of humanity, and how a simpler and more natural lifestyle will help us live a happier and healthier life. And to kick the conversation off, I asked Christopher about his journey in life, and here is what he had to say.
My journey started in South Florida. I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My mother was a nurse and my father was a builder. And when I was a little boy, I had gotten severely ill with gut dysbiosis. Back then, I guess it was 1980, they had no idea what gut dysbiosis was. So I was diagnosed with everything from, they thought I had polio, they thought I had at the time, they didn't have a word for ADD. They just thought I was stupid. I just had every ailment that you could imagine. I was underdeveloped. I had respiratory problems, and by I guess it was right after my fourth birthday, I had gotten to the point where I couldn't breathe, and I actually almost died. So my parents put me on a monofruit diet, and from that point on, I recovered, obviously, and as a young man, as a kid, as a young adult, and then going into my teenage years, I became very athletic. I sort of kind of rebounded with a fierceness, I guess. And going into professional sports, I ended up being a field goal kicker in college at Michigan State University, and then I signed with the Arena Football League in 1998, and everything was performance oriented for me. Everything was you have to perform under pressure, you have to have ice in your veins, you just have to be able to, when the lights are on, perform. And I started to notice that near the end of my career, I didn't have the stress resilience that I once had, and it made no sense. I was stronger, I was more technically sound, but my mind wasn't as resilient. And once again, this was late 90s. There wasn't many people talking about, building mental resilience through diet. And I got into yoga. A girlfriend of mine switched me on to yoga, and she's like, you're always in pain, you're always sore, you have sciatica, why don't you try some yoga? And I fell in love, Mike. Within a month, I was pain-free. I was like, oh my God, this feels so good.
A lot of people say that about yoga, that a lot of ailments go away.
Yeah, it was really incredible. The connection with pranayama, with deep breathing at the time, I had never done. I had always been a chest breather, all the weightlifting I did, all the running. I was always young man in South Florida, you're always have to have the six-pack abs, right? And so I never breathed deeply. I never did the belly breathing that they teach you in yoga. And one day I just had this spontaneous rush, they call it a kundalini rush, where my whole system lit up like a Christmas tree. And then right afterwards I was without pain. I was like, oh my God, this is for me. I got to teach this. And so that's sort of been my life, is whenever something really helps me, I want to share it. It's just the way I am. So I went to India for a couple of years. I didn't go there for a couple of years. Every year for 2 years or for 3 years, I went during the winter and trained there in yoga and meditation, and ended up meeting a wonderful woman, and we both loved Costa Rica, and we kind of knew that South Florida wasn't for us. So we moved down here to Costa Rica with a group of other yogis. And we wanted to make our dream down here happen. And then moving down here, when you move to the jungle, you have to kind of figure things out. You have to really, all the conveniences of the States of the first world was not here. So Learned how to build while I was here because I was poor. I needed, I needed nobody. I couldn't afford to hire anybody else, so it always been in my family. So I had a little bit of a foreknowledge to it. But just learning how to work with natural materials, and then getting into the organic food movement here. I'm lucky enough that my community here is very big into food quality. Most of the people that have moved here for food sovereignty, and they've also moved here so that their kids don't have to be vaccinated. So just ended up getting like, I firmly believe we're the sum of our closest friends, and all my friends here are just really dynamic, healthy people. And so where I'm at now in life is I'm sharing how I build, and I'm sharing how I restored my health. So that's my story.
Now, do you permanently reside in Costa Rica, Christopher? Is that where you call home?
Yes, it is where I call home, but my legal designation is I'm what's known as a perpetual tourist. So I have not seen, because I travel a lot, I travel all over the world. I'm not going to apply to become a resident, because to become a resident, you have to stay in the country for 9 months out of the year.
Okay.
And that's not my goal right now. I'm usually anywhere between 5 to 6 months, traveling through the United States and Europe, and then come back to Costa Rica. But this is where if you could say it's a permanent address, this is like where I've been investing my time and energy to live, like primarily.
What's the difference, or the differences, I should say, between living in the United States and living in Costa Rica? And I'm talking about, I guess, you mentioned the food, you talked about the vaccines. Can you go a little bit more into that? Because I'm hearing more and more people are heading down to Costa Rica. They're moving to Ecuador. They're essentially departing the United States to go to countries and places where they don't feel as shackled or as encumbered by the laws, the regulations, the statutes of the United States. So could you maybe give the audience a little background on that?
Well, it's true. There's just as many laws here as there are in the United States, but they really don't have any way to enforce them. So to give you an example, like my neighborhood is in an agrarian part of Costa Rica near 2 to 3 very touristy hotspots. So in my neighborhood, there's never, you never see cops. There's no need for there to be cops or policemen. Every once in a while, you'll see some government officials, when it comes to infrastructure. But there's really no way to enforce regulation. So here, if you're a Costa Rican, they call them ticos or ticas. If they have children, the social programming that's gone on is that they will just go and get their kids vaccinated. I mean, that's what modern people do. And the agrarian folk think, oh, that's wonderful. Vaccinations are a sign that we're modern. Just like cell phones are a sign that we're modern. And so I could see where it's kind of confusing for the ticos with us being here, because a lot of us come in and we're like doing the exact opposite. We're building with natural materials. We're like saying no to screen time, But the kids are going to Waldorf schools instead of going to schools where they have to wear, uniforms and have to learn nationalism and all that. Almost all the young families that are here are in my specific niche, in my little enclave, because I have to be specific. There's other parts of Costa Rica that are just as, formalized as the States. But
right.
Down here in the Southern Pacific Zone, you can really have a freedom. Like my best friends just came back yesterday, and they've been in the United States for 2 months seeing friends and family. And it's just like literally their kids can run out into the road. They don't have to worry about them getting hit by anything. All the neighbors know each other. The way I liken it to, it's the United States 60 years ago. It's much more agrarian. People look out for one another. You can wave to people, and they wave back.
Yeah.
Like people are genuinely happy to see you. If you make the effort to go see somebody, you're going to sit down and have coffee talk. You're going to really connect. And that's something I got to tell you, Mike, when I was in the States, even when my best friend's there, it's everything is so fast paced. Everything's like go, 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 go. That for those of us that appreciate connecting with people, this environment is it's much more conducive to deeper connection.
There's no depth to the relationships and the interfacing and the interaction in the United States. It's almost like a veneer. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
as if people go through the motions. So this is very interesting, Christopher, that your analogy that it's like going back 60 years ago in the United States. Because I remember growing up as a kid. I'm going to be 57, so I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, if you will. I remember the community-oriented mindset, the neighborhoods, the kids playing in the streets, and so on. And I also found it interesting that you said that the folks that are there in Costa Rica, they view the vaccinations as advancement, and you come down, and those Americans come down that know better, say, you know what, that's not really advancement. It's very, very interesting how you have that dichotomy.
Yeah, it's been a big thing because in our neighborhood specifically, the first real community outreach that was making the link between North Americans and Central Americans was around glyphosate.
Mm.
Because what's happened in the southern zone here is that less and less the Tico families are getting smaller and smaller. So if a landowner here once had 100 acres and had 10 children, 6 or 7 of those children were helping him keep the fence line clean, keep everything the way it should be. But
Right.
now that families are getting smaller and smaller, there's not enough manpower. So people have turned to chemicals. So what's happened was, at first, people were coming down here and saying, no, don't use Roundup. But they weren't relating to the TICOs where they were at, where like they don't have the manpower to actually do the work that's needed, right? And so what's just now happened in like the last 5 or 7 years is that the gringo population is able to communicate well enough with the Tico population, and we're able to work together to bridge the gap and say, okay, we know that there's not enough people to do all the laborious things that were once there. How can we actually implement smarter systems instead of just defaulting to a chemical? Because here, when you use chemicals, or you actually went to go buy food from a store, or you wear terrible perfume, or you have a cell phone, like you get the chance to have a cell phone, these are all like high status things. Like if you get these things, you're up there, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to be sensitive in the fact of like, no, like they are literally like we were back in the day. You can't just tell them, no, that's not good. You have to actually show them and educate and connect with them and make sure that like relating everything to a family perspective and like, and show them and give them an alternative to it. And there's organizations now here that are doing that. We're showing them, hey, you don't have to do this. You can do this. And it's in fact easier and it's better for your family. And you can make money. And so that's what it boils down to. It's just being able to communicate effectively.
Now, how long do you think that you'll be able to retain this type of environment there? Do you see Western culture eroding and seeping into the type of life now that you have there?
In a way, like I see it in a lot of other parts of Costa Rica, much more than where we're at. I mean, there's a huge intention. There's many companies that are doing profit sharing and education in our particular neighborhood. And what that does is it empowers everybody. So that empowerment is leading to a lot of goodwill. Other areas that I've been, there's a lot less goodwill because there is more of like, let's take advantage of the cheap labor type of mentality. And that will only get you so far. Like you can't be a rich person in a poor country is probably the best way to say it. So like in our hood, so many of us are friends. It's just like, oh yeah, come over. I'll show you my smokeless wood fire stove, And then I show them the technology and they're like, oh my God, my wife isn't going to die. My mother died of emphysema from these 3 stone fires. Now I can use, 1/10 of the wood that I used to use. It's easy to light and my wife won't die. Okay, I want that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of meeting them where they're at, not trying to like be so hyperbolic and like say, this is the way it is and this is the way it should be. And, I'm just so happy that in our area, the people have taken the time to really educate. That's been huge.
Now, how do you get around? Do you have a vehicle or is it
I have a quad.
okay?
I get around on a quad. I had a car here, and I always tell people when they're moving here, do not get a car in our neck of the woods, because you're going to spend 3 times the amount of money you think you are to just get the car, and the car's going to die on you. It's the biggest money sink out of anything that goes on here.
Okay.
The tariffs here are so high that, Americans are so used to fast, easy, cheap transportation, and especially with a car per se. And here the roads are horrific. So you drive even, 1/3 the speed that you do in the United States in like a normal SUV, and you think, hey, I'm going to last, but you replace your brakes 3 times a year, turnbuckles, like all of it. It all goes bad here. And it's Central America, so you get a lot of, I don't know if they're cheaper parts. Maybe they're like the parts that they won't send to to more first world areas, but we don't get the best quality. That's probably the best way of saying it.
Okay. So you had mentioned before we got started with the call that I guess you went from going from pro football to then what happened then? Was it massage school or what happened then?
So I had signed with Baltimore out of school, and I got cut because the kicker was an all-pro. Matt Stover was awesome. And then I went back to Michigan State to finish my degree. And so I graduated from Michigan State, and I was kind of floundering because I thought I was good enough to play in the pros. And then I got picked up by the Florida Bobcats, which was just one of the many, I think there was 24 arena football teams at the time.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, like, I was very cocky. Like, I thought I was above that. Like, I thought it was like, beneath me. I should have been, in the league. That's the way I thought. But when I was there, it actually made me so much better of a player. We had to kick at field goal posts that were half the size, so it was like, oh, wow, you have to get like really good. But while I was there, I started getting into meditation. I was coaching kicking, and I went to a coaching camp, and I was introduced to transcendental meditation. And I did one meditation, and I was like, boom, gone. And I came back, and I was like, what is that? And then like that week or the week after, it was 1999, and no, it was over a month. I don't know if you remember this month in movies, but American Beauty came out, Fight Club came out, The Matrix came out, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They all came out in the same month. And like that summer was supposed to be like the summer of the return of Star Wars, the prequels.
Yeah.
And that movie was terrible relative to The Matrix. Like, I went to and saw The Matrix, and my life changed. So I had transcendental meditation, I had The Matrix and Fight Club, and then I had this spontaneous realization when I was in the locker room of like, it was a game, and I'm looking at all these big, beautiful men, and all of us were in extreme pain. Like every single one of us had ice bags or had, shots of Toradol in us or had braces on. And I was looking, I was like, this is a meat grinder. This whole thing is a meat grinder. This whole system is set up for alpha males to get rewarded for killing other alpha males. This is the best way to reduce the alpha male population, because when you're in pain, you have no energy,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it was remarkable, man. It was just that summer, like I totally shifted, and I was like, I was doing yoga, and I just was like, I was just massaging my girlfriend at the time just because I loved to massage. I'd always been touching. And she's like, she was a kinesiologist. And she goes, you're much better than any of the people we have in our office, trained massage therapists. And I was like, oh, you're just saying that, you're partial. She's like, no, for real. Like, you're a natural. And so I went to school for it right then and there. I had plenty of time. Like, my practices were done at 10 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
And so thanks to her, I had, a closed market where I was also working with professional athletes. I could relate to them. So I could work on a really big guy and like be able to move his body, like be able to do that. Whereas like if you were like a smaller woman, it would be kind of really hard to get in there and like really work things out. And then a few years later, when I was really starting to get a lot of clients, I went to a real chiropractor. Like I had been going to chiropractors beforehand, but I went to this Dr. Aaron Applebaum in South Florida, and he did a 40-minute adjustment on me, and it changed my vision. It changed everything. Like my whole life was different. And I just bugged the hell out of him. I said, you have to teach me what you know. This is remarkable. So I saw him 3 times a week for 3 years, or for 2 years. No, excuse me. I saw him 3 times a week for 1 year, and then I saw him twice a week for another 2 years. And I just was like, teach me chemosabi. Like, let me know.
Yeah.
And what the coolest thing about Aaron is that he was teaching me more about energetics. Like, here was a guy that could do any bony adjustment, but he was a Qigong master. I shouldn't say was. He is a Qigong master. He's a double black belt in judo, so he can like hip toss anybody. Like, he's just this coolest dude. And he's sitting there telling me about how he energizes his hands. Like, when he would work on people, the hair would stand up on his head. Like, he was running that much prana. And I was just like, man, this guy's a master. Like, he really knows what he's talking about. And the proof was in the pudding, because in South Florida, all of the yogis and all of the massage therapists went to him to get worked on. He was the guy that adjusted all the adjusters, you know? So I was just like so smitten to actually be in that environment. And this was like, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. So like, it was right before yoga got like huge, you know, it was really growing. But so I was teaching yoga, I was coaching kicking, I was massaging, and that was my lifestyle. And I was teaching meditation, and it was just like full on. My life was going in that direction of just being able to help people heal from their ailments. It's that whole old adage, you know, you teach what you most need to learn. Well, that was me.
Well, that's an amazing shift, Christopher. It really is. Now, I just wanted to ask you one question. You said when you meditated, it sounded like you just took off. So could you describe that experience some more?
Yeah, I was in a bunk room with a friend of mine, and I was stressed because I was like I said, that time I was upset that I wasn't, you know, playing. And a friend of mine just shared with me a deep breathing technique, which was just, you know, take a deep breath in, take a full breath out, and pause. Deep breath in, full breath out, and pause. And we did that like 10 times. And then he started to take me through a guided meditation where, all in all, I can't even remember what he was saying. But within a few minutes, I started to, I don't know if it's called astral projection or whatever it was, but like my mind's eye had taken off like through the cosmos. It was like jumping into warp speed, you know, in Star Trek. Like, lights just went by me. Like, I was just like, I felt like if you could make your emotions visual and have all those emotions be visual for the entire lifespan, it was like I was traveling through that.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, whoa, and I came out of it, and I was like, it couldn't have been more than a few minutes, right? And I'd been in that space for about an hour. And he was laughing. He was like, that's it, you were there. And I was like, what was that? What, like, you gotta share the secret sauce. Like, that was like amazing. And he had been practicing a type of meditation called Atma Vichara. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Atma Vichara means self-inquiry. So self-inquiry is like where you focus on the sense of I, like your sense of me, the ego. And it's a sense of identity. Like, you feel the sense of identity, and then you try to find the witness to your sense of identity. And that's a very tricky proposition.
Yeah.
You know? So I'd really gotten into that to the point where I was traveling to ashrams all over the world to like find the elusive I. Like, where's the I? You know, where's Waldo? And I really devoted a massive amount of energy towards that. Like it was something that was like when I would get into that space behind activity, there was such a relief and such a clarity that I was just like, this is there really is nothing else than this.
Right.
The whole meditation thing really became the primary focus of my life, even much more so than yoga. You know, in my mid to late 20s, it really became about, you know, finding the sense of I.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm a spiritual hypnotherapist and I've been in practice for over 5 years. And I had a chuckle when you were explaining this because I myself have experienced the same thing. And I have many, many clients that I've taken into that space. For many people, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Because you're experiencing something that, like you said, you know, you come out of it and you think to yourself, what was that? Where was I? And it can set in place a major shift in somebody's life and put you on a completely different path.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really cool for me because I noticed my junior year in college, I had a really good year, but I noticed that the way the whole thing was set up was that nothing ever mattered in professional sports. What you've accomplished doesn't matter. It's all about what you're going to do next. And it's a very competitive environment that way. And I knew like, this, you know, I really like doing what I'm doing, but I don't like the culture. Like I don't like the environment. And so when meditation was shown to me, it like even further created a greater contrast. Is to be like, no, 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 no. I don't want to be sitting there and always being torn down and tearing down other people. I actually want to be on the other side of it and showing people what they're capable of. Like
Yeah.
I want to be a builder. Like I want to be like, okay, come on, we can do this. Like, and so when I came out of that meditation, it was like, it was just one of those paradigm shifts. It was just like, it's not that I don't even like this environment that I'm in. It's like, it's the opposite of what I am.
Right.
And my career ended very quickly after that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did you ever look back after that and say, you know, I don't know, maybe I made a mistake, or did you just get on that path and keep going? Sounds like you got on the path and kept going.
Well, I did. I actually was looking at getting back into it a couple times because I had met professional athletes that had a similar experience that I did.
Yeah.
And then they related to me how they actually moved through and were able to perform from this new vista. Like I threw the baby out with the bathwater in a way. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And another thing is, it's really funny. Like, I don't think I really got good at my craft until about my third year of coaching it. So I had been done playing for 2 years. And then I remember the third year I was coaching, one day I was just showing one of my guys what to do, and it was effortless. And so I had that thing in me. I was like, oh my God, I should try out right now. Like, I can't miss. I think I hit that 10,000 hour thing that everybody says, you know, it's like, oh my God, like I can do this in any conditions, anywhere, anytime. Like
Yeah.
I just hit that mark where it was like, I know what I'm doing finally. The entire time I was playing, I was never in that space.
Yeah. That's so interesting, you know, that there you are after the fact, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm at the top of my game right now.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because I've always been like the Seabiscuit type. Like if somebody pisses me off or challenges me, I'll like rise to the occasion. But like if I'm already in this situation and I'm indentured, I don't do as well. Like I have to have that like, it's over there, it's up there, you know, to kind of have the motivation to kick ass. And that's the way it was for me in that regard. But I had been living the perfect life. At the time, I had no debt. I had great friends. I was, you know, when you're a yoga instructor, massage therapist, so like a lot of in South Florida, your life is very much like a retirement life. It's not like, I'm not really working, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is a really great lifestyle. Like with what I had created for myself was like really wonderful.
Was it tough to make a living?
No, not at all. No, I've never had problems with that. Like if I've ever like put my mind on money, I could make money. Like in South Florida at the time, 11 yoga classes a week that I was teaching. I was massaging. I had my massage clientele. I was coaching kickers, so I got paid an hourly rate for that. And then I also, my first 2 years of my massage practice, I was a waiter for on weekends. So I had like 4 or 5 different lines of income coming in where I never felt pressured.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I hustled. I worked a lot in a lot of different things. So it was just like, as I was trying to figure out like what my professional life looked like, that's what I did. I just dabbled in a lot of little things and to kind of get my footing and establish my professionalism.
In a lot of ways, that's the exception to the rule because I know a lot of massage therapists and yoga instructors because of the work that I do. I have a lot of friends and colleagues. I mean, they make a living, but sometimes it could be a challenge.
I was really in the right time at the right place, and I never lived beyond my means. So I was I lived a very Spartan lifestyle in the sense that, I didn't need the newest car. I didn't need much. I kept my bills to about $2,000 a month, and I didn't have any problems with that. I didn't like drinking. I didn't like partying, so I didn't waste my money that way. I think that in your 20s and stuff, at least in the circles I ran in, like a lot of 20-something-year-olds waste their money in partying.
Yeah.
And for me, I was austere. I was in my yoga practice and purifications, and like, if you're not wasting your money on that stuff, you always have enough.
Well, that's the thing, and you reap the benefits from that lifestyle, right? Because the other lifestyle is a lifestyle that people are conditioned to participate in. And once that conditioning takes hold, then what happens is you are wasting money. You're not doing good things for your mind. You're not doing good things for your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you do a lot of people wind up having to dig themselves out of a gigantic hole later on in life. If you can avoid, like you did, from digging that gigantic hole to begin with, then, things can sail pretty smoothly for the most part. I mean, you're really avoiding a lot of the pitfalls that many, many other people succumb to.
Right. Right. I would agree. I mean, I saw it. I had lots of friends in the service industry that, I mean, we would make a few $100s a night and then they would go spend it. I'm like, wait a minute. I just didn't work a 7-hour shift to make that money just to get rid of that money.
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense on what? So, yeah, I've always been somewhat of a cheapskate, and I've always been like, my time is worth more than anything. I'm not going to waste my time. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Yep.
Mhm.
What progressed from that point?
I ended up getting really fat. I ended up getting Candida and having really bad gut dysbiosis. So I weighed about 235 pounds when I finally figured it out. Like, wait a minute, this vegetarian lifestyle that I was living in an ashram in South Florida, and it was all vegetarian. I'd been a vegetarian for like 3 years, but I was eating like tons and tons of carbohydrates. And for my particular mesomorphic body style, that was just the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
And I had extreme gut dysbiosis earlier in my life, and it just like really ramped up when my sugar intake took off. So had gone to India a couple times, really gotten in deep with the meditation and yoga crowd there, and decided, okay, we're going to move to Costa Rica. Like, we're going to get out of the States and live in an environment that actually reflects our state of mind. But I was 235 pounds, and I'm only 5'9". Like, I was a big boy. And so it was like 6 months before we were scheduled to move down here, and I did a Candida cleanse. And it was another one of those humongous like shifts in my life where it was like, I could see again, I could think again, I could hear again, all my senses were back.
Did you just take all the sugar out, Christopher? Is that what you did?
Yeah, I was down to below 15 grams of sugar a day. I was taking a very strong antifungal from New Chapter Organics at the time. And then I was also, I took 2 different types of probiotics at the same time. And I was doing, now it's termed intermittent fasting. At the time, they didn't have that saying, but I wouldn't eat anything that could be my body could process as a carbohydrate for anywhere from 18 to 20 hours a day.
Okay.
So like I would eat like at 2 p.m. and at 6 p.m. and then I wouldn't eat again until 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. the next day. And I lost 30 pounds in a month. I was
Wow.
like, woohoo! I'm like back to my playing weight. But that killed my liver. That killed my liver and my kidneys because I lost weight so quickly and I wasn't doing other things like doing sauna. I wasn't taking any like calcium bentonite clay. I wasn't doing anything that would actually take all the endotoxicity out of my system. So when I was losing all the fat, I basically went brain dead for a while. And we moved down here to Costa Rica and it flared up again because down here it's all about fruit and like carbohydrates, and the environment here is so hot and wet that it was like the Candida flared up again. So I kind of learned how to mitigate it down here, but at the same time, I got a flesh-eating parasite called Papillomoya, and so did my wife back then. She got it, and a couple of our friends got it, and so I got into learning how to get rid of parasites. Like I had never even considered the whole parasitic load on your body, and so didn't even know that Candida was considered a parasite once it gets to that level where you have leaky gut. So for about a year here in Costa Rica, I was letting go of the vegetarian ideals, and a friend of mine, she gifted me Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions, Dr. Weston Price's work. He was a dentist at the turn of the 20th century that chronicled the degeneration of the jaw and the teeth of the Western world, and he linked it to sugar consumption and carbohydrates. And he showed 12 indigenous populations around the world how they had these big, beautiful smiles and their teeth were perfect. And they never brushed their teeth. They never, they didn't have Listerine. They didn't have any of this stuff. And he was able to make the link between the jaw, the formation of the teeth, and nutrition. And he was like, the teeth in your jaw are all about the quality of nutrition that you put in your body. And they found that there are three things that every indigenous culture that has these big, beautiful jaw lines and longevity have. They all cook over fire. They all have a very high saturated fat diet. And the grains that they eat are all fermented. So if they're going to have any type of grain, it's fermented. They never eat grain like we do in the West. I essentially became a neo-paleo guy before anybody was talking about that. Well, I'm sure there were people talking about it before it was like in the modern lexicon, and because it saved me. Like I was really suffering badly with trying to be a vegetarian in a tropical environment as a white boy. Like my gut just wasn't able to handle it. But very soon after going and shifting out of the carbohydrates and more into eating high quality organic meats, organic green vegetables, really reducing my legume and grain intake, man, everything took off for me. And now, like, I'm almost 40, and my body's much stronger than I was 10 years ago when I came down here.
Very interesting. So what are some of the symptoms of Candida, Christopher, so that maybe some of the audience can relate?
The first thing that you'll notice, it's different for men and women. So the first thing that most people are very unaware of is that they start to lose their senses. You'll start when you have leaky gut, and I want to be specific. When you have the Candida to the point where it proliferates into more of a fungi type of thing, where fungus like shoots mycelium, and that when it shoots that through your intestines, you basically get food allergies to everything that you eat. So what occurs is your immune system starts shunting all of its energy to your gut, and then it leaves you susceptible to everything else. All other areas of your body become susceptible to infection. So for me, I was getting parasites here and there. Like I was having all these different problems. I had real bad premature graying. I was actually losing my hair. I got my gut really swelled. Like I had this like spare tire around my kidney area and in my lower abdomen, even though I was like expending tons of calories, you know. I couldn't see, like I would notice that like if I was looking short and then I tried to focus on long distance away, the the speed at which I could actually change focus really had slowed down. I noticed that my eyes got tired very quickly, and all these things I thought was just normal aging. Like I just thought, hey, I'm getting older. I'm in my 30s. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
this is just what happens. You know, I'm getting gray. You know, my dad got gray when he was that. You know, all this type of stuff, and none of it was. I'm telling you, like none of it. Like I started behind the eight ball to begin with, and like to be able to like show like once I took sugar out of my diet. Oh, I have to share this with people, by the way. This is probably the biggest symptom that you have. You have an insatiable craving for sweets. That's the number one way you know you have Candida. And a lot of Americans, they will switch. This is a very, very smart parasite. They won't think that they want sweets all the time, but they will reach for a beer or they'll reach for some sort of carbohydrate. And that's what I mean by an insatiable desire for sweets. It's an insatiable appetite for carbohydrates. Like I could not eat enough carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Like I was like one of those guys that would like have a huge bowl of pasta and be like, okay, I can have 4 more of those. Like I could just eat and eat and eat. And what I come to find out was that my leptin response in my body, like when our system is optimal, we produce this hormone called leptin, which tells us that, hey, we're full. Well, that mechanism had been destroyed in me. And I see this with a lot of my clients is like they can't, especially men, they can't stop eating because they're like, well, I'm not full yet. Like you should eat till you're full. But the thing is, when your body's not producing leptin, or the receptor sites of the leptin have been, you know, sheared off, you can just keep eating and eating and eating thinking that that's normal.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Because there's no shutoff valve.
I mean, I was literally eating like 3 to 4 times the volume of food that I eat now. And I see this with a lot of my friends that are vegetarians, that are raw foodists. Just the sheer volume of food that they eat is mind-boggling. Like there had never ever been a time ever in our genetic history where people could actually eat that much volume of food. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they look and they just keep eating and eating and eating, and they're like, oh, it's healthy. I should just keep eating and eating. And I'm like, no, when you're healthy, like Mike, I have literally a bowl of food like this big, right? And maybe half of a bowl a day. And I'm a 185, 190 pound guy, right? And I'm good. Like I'm solid. Back when I had Candida, I could eat 4 to 5 times that amount. So I always ask people, what's the volume of food you're eating? Don't count calories with me. None of that matters. What's the volume of food they're eating? Do you feel full? Most of the time they'll say, oh, I don't feel full. Another thing I talk to them about is their senses. Like, when was the last time you felt like you had good vision? When was the last time you technically had good vision? How sore do you feel? This is another big thing, is that a lot of people have their pain tolerance. When you have Candida, your pain tolerance drops tremendously, and it's because your body's in a constant state of acidosis. So in massage school, they taught us, like, whenever you're dealing with people that their muscles are weak, whenever you don't use your body, whenever you don't use your muscles, the glycogen in the muscles will start to oxidize, and it oxidizes into a form of lactic acid. So when you massage that, if that acid comes and touches the nerve receptors, you feel pain. That's what the feeling of pain is. So in massage school, they taught us, okay, if like you're massaging a very unhealthy person, you have to be very, very light in touching them because they're just going to be in a constant pain response because of the acid.
I'm very interested in this because I have somebody, in my family that experiences a lot of chronic pain. So continue, and I'll ask some questions. Maybe I can help her.
Oh, I'm so happy about this because, so when I'm massaging people that are that are overweight, what will occur is that I can barely touch them. And it's because of this extra lactic acid, or there's another type of acid, I'm forgetting what it's called. So I can't really do anything for them, right, from a deep tissue perspective. But when I work on people that are extremely fit, I could put my entire body weight into them, like elbows, knees, everything, and they're never in pain. And the difference is that because they're fit, their body actually uses all the glycogen in their muscles. So when I go to actually massage those muscles and work on the connective tissues, there's no acid that's being released into their system. So for them, it's just this pleasurable, like, oh my God, he's actually just manipulating my body back into the correct position. So there's one less layer that I have to work on.
Yeah.
And I can see now where most of the people that I work on that are overweight, like especially my long-term clients, they're not only shielding themselves from their environment with food, because when you eat food all the time, it acts as a barrier. It kind of numbs you, you know. They use that to numb them, but it's actually quite literally like an insulation. It's literally insulation to their environment. So I wrote an article or a blog post on my site that talks about the turtle shell effect in modern world. I really believe almost all of the people that end up becoming overweight in the modern world, it's because they're actually ultra sensitives. That's what happened to me. I was an ultra sensitive. I'm extremely sensitive to Wi-Fi and extremely sensitive to chemicals. And so when all these things start to occur to you, it's like too much information. So you need a barrier. You need to put up a wall, like a force field. And for most of us that are predisposed to this, our barrier is just fat. It's adipose tissue. It's like okay, I'm gonna like put myself in a little fat bubble. That's what nature does. In nature, it uses hydrocarbons to actually encapsulate toxins. So when our body becomes so toxic, it actually needs to encapsulate itself from the epigenetic influences of the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about somebody, Christopher? Now, I have somebody who's very near and dear to me. She has been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, but then an integrative medicine doctor said, I don't think it's that. I think maybe you have mold exposure issues. So it just seems to be well, let me just phrase it this way. It doesn't seem like the doctors really know what it is. So what happens with somebody who has something like that? In other words, she's experiencing a lot of pain in her extremities, in her ankles, balls of her feet, her wrists, her knuckles, and into her fingers. And every once in a while, it'll creep up into the arms and into the shoulders. She's going through a lot right now, working with an integrative doctor to try to figure out what's going on. But, we're not seeing the progress that we had hoped that we would see. So if you had somebody that came to you with those types of symptoms, what would you look for? What would you suspect that maybe we should start here as what the problem might be?
I would ask about the diet. Like I'd find right out off the bat, like what her normal dietary routine is. I would ask her about her cravings, like what she actually craves, because what people crave tell you a lot about what's actually, running the show from an endocrine perspective.
Yeah.
I would ask about her physical routine and her environment, like where she lives, where she works, what she actually does for a living. Does she feel a sense of satisfaction with it? And then I would also ask a lot of interpersonal questions about relationships, because our relationships are it's a deeper level of how we actually interact with our environment. So people that are in our environment are our environment, right? So, I've had the fortunate I've had fortunate friendships with homeopaths, and I love the way a homeopath actually looks at a person's physical, their biology is their biography. They like to say that, and I really do believe that. Like, I've seen that enough in myself. Like, I was big and swollen when I needed to be big and swollen because my environment wasn't right,
Yeah.
you know? So whenever dealing with arthritis specifically, I've had probably a dozen clients that have had rheumatoid arthritis. The joints, whenever the joints are inflamed, that's what arthritis is, there is definitely a dietary component that needs to be looked at. The joints are it all depends what you're genetically predisposed to, but the joints are usually showing you that you have a chronic allergic reaction to something you are putting in your body. Almost all the people that I know that have rheumatoid arthritis, not almost, in fact, every person that I've worked with that's had rheumatoid arthritis, they're all extremely allergic to grains.
Okay.
So just right off the bat, I ask them to abstain from grains. And, later along in their progress, like once the inflammation's gone down and their pain state has gotten to a point where they can manage their pain state, say they're at a 10, say they get down to like a 2, like a 3 or a 2, then just adding, a very specific type of grain that's been fermented, I'll just test it to see how their body reacts. But it's another thing I really get into is with people is where they're at with their mineral uptake. So in my community, this is something I've seen a lot. Like, people eat very good food, but they don't eat it at the right times, and they don't eat it with the things that would be complementary to it so that your body could absorb it. So for example, I have a lot of friends that are vegetarian that eat these huge salads, but they don't put any fat in the salad. But most of the nutrients and vitamins that are in that salad are fat soluble. So you just ate all this great roughage. You ate all these things that should be just wonderful for your body, yet you're not going to absorb any of it. And another thing is that I was exposed to Ayurvedic medicine in my early 20s and when I was going to India. And I actually think their way of looking at food from an elemental perspective is much more balanced. So when I was a vegetarian, and I was eating all this roughage, like all these greens that are very hard for my body to actually digest, I was causing more damage to my gut than actually taking a step back and eating what they would consider pre-digested food, which is cooked food. When you look at it, when you cook something, you're pre-digesting it, right?
Yeah, right.
So in Ayurvedic medicine, they say, if your gut is injured, why would you put something that's hard to process in there? So I think that's totally accurate. I mean, it was accurate for me. And then I started studying. Have you heard of the Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride?
No, I have not.
She wrote a book. She's a neuroscientist from Russia. She's now a U.S. citizen. She wrote this book called Gut and Psychology Syndrome, and it's the GAPS diet. And she took an Ayurvedic perspective, even though she didn't know it was, because she's looking at it from the neuroscience perspective. And it's really that, like, be gentle to yourself. This is something I'm always trying to impart to my clients is, like, you have to be gentle with yourself. Don't feel guilty for your dis-ease. Almost everybody feels guilty for them being overweight or being in pain. I'm like, why do you feel guilty? Let it go. Like, because guilt will, like, create a tripwire for you to keep, doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? So this is a huge thing with her, is to, like, first remove those things that are creating the pain. And almost every time in the case of rheumatoid arthritis, it's an allergy to grains. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but it's a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know about her diet? Does she eat grains?
She eats grains. Yep, she eats it. I mean, she was trying to do gluten-free. I mean, she was trying just about everything. They have her on a bunch of supplements and stuff like that. But like I said, we're not seeing the progress that we would like to see. So
yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to her. I'd love to, like, see, because, a lot of times when I'm speaking with somebody directly, I have like more of an intuitive sense. I can go, oh, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? The diet, this is where I've gotten to. And I really recognize you can work on all the peripheral, like higher order things, but if the diet isn't right, nothing is right. Have you heard of Wim Hof, the gentleman named Wim Hof?
No, I'm batting zero with you now with people that I should know.
No, this guy's amazing. He set world records for doing underwater swimming in ice cold conditions. He's hiked Mount Everest, without a shirt on. He's done Mount Kilimanjaro 3 times. He's taken, people in their later 50s and 60s up Mount Kilimanjaro. And he's learned this method of being able to breathe that creates a very high state of oxidosis in the system. And so what this means is that his blood is super saturated with oxygen. So when people go get ozone therapy, what feels so good in ozone therapy, especially spot ozone therapy, where they're having a pain response, is when you're having the pain response, that's the acid, remember, that I was talking about. Well, the pH of acids are, much lower, or excuse me, the pH, when the pH is low, the acid is high. When you add oxygen to the system, to that, it alkalizes the system. So he will get his body into a high alkalosis state with the breathing. I misspoke earlier with the oxidosis. He'll go into alkalosis. And so what he's effectively doing is turning all the pain receptors off. But at the same time, and this is the coolest thing, the glycogen mechanism in the system that we were talking about earlier gets turned off. So the muscles in the body tell you, the muscles act like a battery. And what I've seen when it comes to people that are depressed is that they have a very, very low muscle tone. You don't need big muscles. It's about the muscle tone. Yep. The muscle tone tells you how energetic somebody is, both through locomotion. Obviously, if you have lots of locomotion, you're going to have more muscle tone, but it also tells you where their psychology is at. And without fail, I'm not going to ever say 100% of the time, but in the circles that I've run in looking at my own body as a barometer, when I was in a very soft state where my muscle was underdeveloped, I was in depression. And I don't look at depression as a bad thing. It's just like a marker. It's just like there's not enough energy in the system to overcome the stresses in the environment. That's the way I would term depression. So where I get into people where I really love working with them is like saying, hey, let's get strong first. There's a wonderful gentleman named Pavel Tatsuin, who is an Olympic trainer for the Russians back in the 80s and 90s, where he has this whole, I guess you'd say training regimen called strength first, And I really believe that, because when you have a certain level of strength or muscle tone in this regard, you just have enough energy to overcome the stress of your environment. If you don't have the muscle tone, you don't have enough energy in your system, and you're like the exact opposite of what Wim Hof is talking about with the alkalosis state. You're in an acidosis state, and so you're going to become so reactionary to your environment. You will not have the capacity to actually overcome the stress of your environment. Does this make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Very interesting. So how does your practice work in Costa Rica, Christopher?
Oh, it's wonderful. So like for me, like I'm really big into variability of training. So it just so happens that one of my neighbors is a double black belt in a type of martial arts. So a couple times a week I get to, do martial arts with he and his wife. Another one of my neighbors have a flying trapeze, like a real flying trapeze. Like, have you ever seen like the aerial arts stuff? So I'll go flying, 2 or 3 times a week. I told you earlier, my roads are terrible, so I'm always hiking. Sometimes not because I want to, So I'd say like 3 times a week. I'm going up very steep hills, like climbing from 1,000 feet of elevation up to like 2,000 feet of elevation. I do a lot of massage too. Like even in the slow season right now, I have maybe 10 or 12 massages a week. And, during the season, I probably have like 30 to 40 massages a week. So, that takes a lot of energy. And just owning property here in Costa Rica, like I find myself at least an hour and a half a day with my machete outside, like cutting stuff and moving wood. And I want to get into I kind of want to do a joke on CrossFit in this way is like, I want to have what's known as like the Costa Rican tropical CrossFit, where like you come down and you just manage a property. Because you're going to end up lifting very heavy shit
Yeah.
off camber. You're going to be dodging terciopellas and like, running under spider webs. Like you're going to be doing stuff that like, they're trying to generate in a false environment that you normally get in a natural environment. And so for me, like I really try and tell people like get out in nature as much as possible, because I just end up being out in nature so much that I have natural variability in training. Like when I was a professional athlete, we worked hard, but all of our movements were the same. Like we always did like a bench press was a bench press and a curl was a curl, and like, leg presses were leg presses. But my body got terribly tight because I didn't have any variability. I didn't have any fluidity in what I was actually interacting with. Everything was linear, right?
Yeah.
Or rectilinear. So here, everything's organic and curved, like for real. Like you just have to figure things out. Like you have to, it's very stressful. Like I tell my Belgian girlfriend all the time, I'm like, sweetheart, you don't understand. Like this is not the first world. And half the things I do are just overcoming what in the modern world you never even have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the other day we had a rainstorm here and a tree fell and it fell on my power line. I go to fix the power line and there's a snake in the actual torciopella, one of the most venomous snakes in the world, in the actual meter box.
Oh boy.
You don't deal with those things when you live in
Yeah. What did you do?
I jumped. But that's the thing, right? Like, so we all here, we kind of laugh because it's like, man, you really you got to be on your toes. You got to be nimble and you got to be able to adapt because things are always changing. I've been reading a bunch of evolutionary biologists. And what I really like about what they say, or what I've been getting from what they're saying, is that they talk about how the modern man in the first world is always looking to try and create danger for himself. Because where we come from genetically is we were living in environments like Costa Rica.
Right.
There was always, you always have to be alive a little bit. Like you always have to be like, I'm riding my quad down here to get to the cafe to talk to you. I have a machete on my quad because half the time there's a tree that's on an off-camber turn somewhere where I have to be able to brake and get off my quad and chop the tree to be able to get to where I'm going. There's an element of danger here that's always present, but in a weird way, it makes you very, very alert.
Yeah.
And it makes you extremely cognizant of how to be alive.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful thing. And I notice a lot of my friends that are male friends in the modern world, they're always generating that type of danger in very controlled environments, whether it's in martial arts or with motorcycles, or they're always trying to create that element of danger because the modern world had kind of taken that away from them,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing. I love reading and listening to these evolutionary biologists around that specific, characteristic of modern life.
It's very interesting because it's keeping you mentally sharp just by being in the environment that you're in, right? And as you're explaining it, I'm thinking, well, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be, versus, like you said, going out and having to artificially manufacture that type of stimulus or that type of dynamic in your life.
Yeah, I read I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Dr. Christopher Ryan. He talked about how industrialists had figured out at the turn of the 20th century that industrialization was going to take the danger away from most young men. So this was advantageous to them because what started to become very profitable was war, right? So the way that you could sell war, and especially sell war to young men, was that you brought glory into it. The glory of defending your motherland, the glory of defending your country, the glory of, fighting with a band of brothers, like all these things that when we were tribal, we had every day.
Yeah.
And there is a solidarity. I mean, I've played team sports and I've lived in an environment where we've literally had all of our bridges knocked out from floods. And it is so cool to have a band of brothers where we go chop down a couple trees and we build a bridge in a couple days. I've been on teams where we were a losing team. We were getting our ass kicked, but we were a band of brothers. We came together to fight. And it's a beautiful thing to go have that type of solidarity with people, and you only get that through adversity. And so what I kind of feel is like in the modern world that when you make everything so convenient, you take away that complexity that we actually need. We need to go through some rough times. We need to be able to band together in a tribal mentality here and there. That's not, out to go kill somebody in some other country, but like actually have that teamwork. And I don't know if this is so for women, but I'm speaking for men specifically right now, but like have that, like, all right, let's overcome this trial and let's do it. And we'll laugh at the end of the day, even if we're bloodied and battered, like we had gotten through it together.
Right. Well, there's that whole common unity in the community aspect that is missing in the so-called advanced countries, So I think what I see, Christopher, is that especially a lot of guys have become very, very soft. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, but what I mean is, they don't have that natural sense of connectedness, just that belonging to, almost like that, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but belonging to your tribe, doing the things that you need to do to make sure that their survival, to make sure that those in your community are taken care of. But it was all at one time, it was packaged as part of life. It's just when you were born into the world, that is what life was. It was part and parcel of existing. I don't see that anymore. I mean, I'm seeing, or I should say that I'm seeing less and less of that type of drive, motivation, thinking, aspiration with a lot of men, especially in the developed countries.
I would agree. Like I wrote this a couple of years ago. In fact, Ollie really liked this. I was talking to Ollie about this last year. I said, those that, if there are a group that wants to control people, it's very simple how to do it. Instead of like trying to be, over the top, whips and chains and stuff like that, instead of killing them with kindness, you kill them with convenience.
Yeah.
You make everything convenient. And when you get things that are convenient, you become soft.
Right.
You just do. It's without a doubt. And all of us that live down here, it's so funny because when we go back to the States, it's so easy to do anything there. It's so easy. All of us, we know we could move back there and absolutely crush with businesses if we wanted to in the States. But why? Why do that?
Right.
For what? Because it's so much easier there, and people just get soft. It's true. It's a success. Like I've been a part of good teams and bad teams. And the one thing about the good teams is the biggest thing that you have to fight is complacency. You get sort of entitled. There's a sense of entitlement.
Yep.
And when you have a culture that believes that, they're just entitled. We're just entitled to all these good things. This is just what's so. That entitlement really deadens the capacity for evolution.
I agree, and you see it here because when, as an example, if you guys go from Costa Rica back to the United States, like you said, it's so easy to do things here. But in reality, it's an artificial environment, you know?
Right.
It's an environment that's been manufactured so that it does instill complacency and apathy and softness, you know? So I don't know how we overcome that, Christopher, as a civilization, as humanity.
You know, I try not to think of it in such broad terms because I think I get really depressed when I do that. Like when I go back to the States and I see like very like young men, like, you know, the kids of my clients there, like I really like get sort of hopeless. Like you have no capacity to really stick to anything. You're ADD. You don't know what it means to actually work hard. And like when I was in India, one of my mentors there, he was so specific. He said, all power is the capacity to focus. So when I see the majority of these young men that are ADHD or ADD, they have no capacity to really focus on anything that could get things done. You know, they can move, you know, data and bits of information around, but when it actually comes to doing real work, it's like, uh, and who's to say? I don't know. I can't prognosticate the future. I mean, if robots and machines are supposed to be doing everything for us, I think that's a sad time. Because there's nothing better than a hard day of physical work. I'm not saying we should all like strive to work hard physically, but like there's something so satisfying about using all of your body.
Right, and that's because that is your natural state. And I don't care what anybody says. I mean, they say, "Oh no, we've evolved. You know, we've evolved
I
into
don't
this."
believe that. I believe we've devolved. I really believe we've devolved. Like when I look at it, I don't think we're evolving. Actually, I think certain capacities have evolved, but like you said, they're evolving from an artificiality.
Right.
I actually think, you know, the yogis from the Dravidian cultures, you know, pre-Diluvian Dravidian cultures, they could do a lot more than we can do now. We're using cell phones and Skype to like talk around the world. You know, I've had enough psychic communication to be like, oh, that was just our natural state.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen people levitate. I've seen people do things that should not happen, you know, given the modern structure. And it's just like, because these gadgets end up ruling everything, it's like, oh, we're so advanced. It's not that we're advanced. We're devolving because we need more of these things.
Yeah.
so,
Right.
so like to me, like I look at, like I'm a nerd. I love the type of building I'm into is they're called geopolymers, and it's like the way that the pyramids were built all around the world was with this geopolymer technology, and it's so obvious. The geopolymers are the way humans used to make stone, and when I say that to people, they're like, "What? We can't make stone. Stone is totally geological." No, 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 no. Today we make a stone called cement, but that's an alkaline process. Our forefathers made stone through an acidic process called geopolymerization, and they did it so well that we still haven't figured it out, except for one man. And it's just like, you want to know why there's no, like, you know, paper that goes into these stones in the Great Pyramids? It's because they cast them in place. They're all cast in place. And
Yeah.
so, like, I started studying all this stuff, and I'm like, the technologies that were used by our forebears was so immensely brilliant that we're just now like starting to touch it, right?
Right.
I'm not convinced that we're evolving.
Well, I'm not either. And I always say to folks, there's a reason why the structures back in ancient civilization were made, they were megalithic and stone and so on. It's because they knew that it was going to last for a very, very, very long time. And if you take a look at our culture and you wait 500 to 1,000 years from now, and
You won't see anything.
you won't see anything. You know, I
No.
know that's very hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, but that's
Can
what
I
will be there, nothing.
can I give you an example of that?
Sure.
Okay. Down here, you know, there's lots of contractors that come down here and build timeshare type things. Well, one of the timeshares right here in Dominical got shut down a few years ago. And it was all like glass and steel, cement, and all this stuff, like really, really quick construction. In 7.5 years, those buildings were pretty much just eaten by the jungle, right? I go up into the mountains talking with my Tico friends, where their father's father had built them what's called a trapiche. And a trapiche is like a dome that's used as a huge oven so that they can cook down sugarcane, right?
Yeah.
No roof on this thing, built out of clay. It's lasted 60 years out in the rain. There's no cement, no steel. How can this clay thing actually last out in the tropical rainforest, yet these huge steel, 8-inch steel I-beams and glass and bolts and stainless steel and all this stuff not last? And it was very simple. They had figured out when they were building the trapiches back in the day, hey, if there's a little bit of sugar mixed in with the clay and a little bit of poop mixed into the clay, and you heat it at a certain temperature, it becomes a self-vitrifying brick that's impervious to weather.
Yeah.
And that's just with like being aware of like the natural environment around them. They didn't have to source the steel beams from China. They didn't ship anything in. This was just through like, okay, natural ingenuity and seeing what works and everything like this. And we took a sledgehammer to this thing because we're building a new one. Because I build ovens, like I'm fascinated with ovens and wood fire and stuff like that. I shit you not, it was like trying to hammer through a 12-inch thick brick. That's how hard this thing was. It's just I get such a kick out of that type of thing. And last year I went to France to go study under Dr. Davidovitz. He's the gentleman that figured out the whole geopolymer technology. And it was brilliant. Like his presentation and his son's presentations about how the geopolymers work. Mike, you just shit yourself. This guy is so brilliant about how exactly these megalithic structures were built. And he's been able to reproduce it. This is the thing. Like he's been able to formally say this is exactly the casing stones that were on the pyramids. This is exactly this foundational stone. The Sphinx, this is what this is. Like he's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, send me that link, Christopher. And what I'll do is I'll add it into the show notes because I love stuff like that. But I got to tell you, when you sent the email over to me, you said that you were a semi-interesting person, and I kind of laughed, and I thought to myself, I've never heard anybody describe themselves that way. But I got to tell you, Christopher, you're a very interesting person, and it's been a great discussion.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Mike.
Is there anything else you wanted to discuss? Anything on your mind?
Well, one thing I'd just like to say is like I'm starting to teach what I know. From a bodywork perspective. So if anybody's interested in that, they could check out my website. I really am always breaking things down to like the physical nuts and bolts of things. I'm sure, as you could tell in this interview, I'm like, oh, how is that built? How do you do this? So like when I get to work with people on a physical level and I actually get to like dig into their muscles and like reset their bones and everything like that, there has been no greater teacher to me than actually working on people. Yep. Like actually getting to feel the human body in all of its glory. And I just love it. I absolutely adore it. So for any of those people that have had an inkling or a desire about learning the brilliance of touch, because that's really probably the best way I could say it. That when you cultivate your capacity to touch another human, there's a certain brilliance, there's a certain capacity to learn your environment that is imbued into you. And I would say, anybody that is in partnership, anybody that has a willing partner, a consensual partner, get into touching them with love. Like get into, no matter what you think, your sense of touch through your hands will teach you more things than you could imagine. Yeah.
I agree with that. I'm a Reiki master, and
wonderful.
I can completely relate to that. I absolutely can relate to that.
Yeah.
Well, Christopher, what is your website so we can get people to head over there?
It's confidentdiet.com. So it's CONFIDENT diet, DIET.com. And that's just my website.
Okay. And so you have an open invitation to come back anytime. I love these types of discussions. I like getting into the wellness, the holistic aspects of it, the spiritual aspects, and all those types of themes. Every once in a while, I've got to break away from the conspiracy stuff and the alternative research stuff because I'm an energy worker. So there's a whole aspect of me, a big part of me that loves to talk about this stuff, and I can relate to it. And I think it's very important that we're able to get this type of information out to people because they don't understand it because mostly they're unaware. Nobody's told them about it. Nobody's taught them about it. If we can try to get them off that hamster wheel
Right.
that they're on and we can get them shifted over and they can start thinking about alternative ways of keeping themselves healthy, I think that's very, very important.
Perfect. Yeah, it's like for me, like my best friend, he's an ayahuasquera. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of ayahuasca, what that is.
I would love to do ayahuasca. I'm trying to figure out.
Well, come down here, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I might take you up on that.
yeah, please,
Yeah,
please. I will suggest this, like anybody that's considering that, the number one thing that you have to consider is the environment that you do it in.
right.
Because the one thing that ayahuasca does, or any of these plant medicines, is it opens you up to the epigenetic conditioning of your life. And what I mean by epigenetic is, to some degree, we are our environment. And so if you're in an environment that is trying to kill you and you take ayahuasca, you're not going to have a good experience.
Yeah, I've read about that. Yep.
But if you're in an environment where the shaman or the purveyor of the medicine and the environment itself is really there for you, your experience is mind changing. It's beyond, like, it will do 30 years of good psychotherapy in an evening. Like the amounts of transitions that I've seen with that. And the cool thing is too is I have enough people in my life that have tried all the different plant medicines where I know now that those frequencies are always available to us. It's just like when your body chemistry changes a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing like Wim Hof is talking about when you go from acidosis to alkalosis, like a whole new vistas there. Well, it's the same thing with these plant medicines. They change your vibrational frequency to the point where you're like, oh, that's what's happening. So it's like, and so I really recommend anybody that wants to do anything like that, come to an environment that is really there to nourish them.
Well, I may seriously take you up on that offer, to be honest with you. Christopher, I'm really, really happy that we connected. And like I said, you have an open invitation. It was really a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to have to thank Oli for having good friends.
Yeah, Ollie's great. Ollie's wonderful. Like he and I mean, I think the first time we talked for like 6 hours straight. Like it was just,
Yeah,
we're soul brothers.
he's a great guy. All right, Christopher, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been so, so generous. And what I'll do is I'll email you maybe later on today or tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, and I'll reconnect. All righty.
Sounds
Bye-bye,
great,
my
Mike.
friend. Bye-bye now.
Bye, see you.
And that concludes another Sage Quay Hour interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are included in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sagequayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to my hub website at sagequay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Sometimes I feel so tired, but today I feel so wired. standing still, drifting away. They lost their will. I just want to shake them and give them ears. Wake up, stop living in fear. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. Sometimes I feel so cheated. But today I won't be defeated. I cut the chains and I break free. Open your eyes and you will see. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. We are here to live and learn. Another life, another turn. Don't be afraid to shine. Don't be afraid to open your mind. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. You are a beautiful soul.